If you're here for securing managing mobile devices in the workplace, you're in the right room. My name is Gregory, and I'm with a firm called Creative Breakthroughs. We're a consulting firm in Troy, Michigan. We've been around for about 22 years, and I'm a principal strategist there. I've been there for about 9. And what I want to share with you guys here today is something that's a topic about a changing landscape. It's changing all the time, every month, certainly every year, the last few years. It's still new, relatively speaking, for what it is we do in this room in general, what people in this room are paid to do in this room. So it's a liquid state right now, and a lot of things going on. I want to give you guys a lot of food for thought and a lot of strategies that you can take back to your organizations and then apply those in the real world. I've had the pleasure of dealing with a lot of large vendors, some of which are here today, and we enjoy a very close relationship with them at Creative Breakthroughs. And as such, we can see how this landscape's changing, where the industry is going, and how people are adopting mobile device strategies realistically. I mean, there's a lot of FUD out there. There's a lot of concern, a lot of people who are overly engineering solutions or under-engineering them, as it were. So we're going to kind of go through that as a group here today. I've only got about 30 minutes, so I'm going to get through a lot of information real quick, and I thought what I would do is maybe make myself available to you individually afterwards if you like. So this is going to go pretty fast. I've got a lot of content to cover. Okay, our agenda for today, quick company history, which I basically already did, so I'm trying to chop out a slide already before I get started. Mobile devices in the workplace, there's a state of the state, kind of a level set I want to do with this team here to make sure we're all on the same page. There's some definition of terms and the players, the strategies, and how the industry is shaping right now. Who's who in the zoo, understanding what your options are, both technically and non-technically in mobile device management space. Some strategies and some scenarios that I've developed here. A couple of them we'll walk through together. Again, get you to ask the right questions of your teams back where you come from, your organization, and how you really want to adopt a tiered solution. We're going to go through that. Then some top 10 recommendations at the end, again, leaving you with some things to think about. Kind of already went over this, our history. I can talk to you more about that later. I don't want to beat this one up. Like I said, I'm trying to get some time back as I only have about 30 minutes. A couple quotes. Any good presentation starts off with these, but these are really relevant and they're current. Well, in the last couple months, actually. The one from Gartner actually I think says it best when it's the single most radical shift in economic of client computing for the business since PCs. Ooh. It is something new to corporate America to design a secure, robust, and usable mobile device strategy, but it isn't something new to us in society. I mean, I've been using mobile devices for as long as I can remember. My kids will never know life without a cell phone, a tablet. So it's already there in the public space. Now, bringing all that into corporate America makes a lot of people in this room really their skin crawl, including myself. We're concerned about it. We don't want to deal with the headaches of someone bringing me or bringing you guys an iPad or an iPhone or a Droid saying, I want to connect this to the network. I mean, the whole concept really is they're leading us, where we're used to actually kind of leading them, and it's uncomfortable for us. So we're going to talk about that here as a group too. Next one is John Harris. He's the Chief Architect and Global VP of IT Strategy at GlaxoSmithKline. Pretty influential guy, founded Corporate IT Forum, and he says it really well here. This actually just came out in the last 30 days or so. The ones who succeed in bringing your own device strategies, and I want to be clear, I'm not just talking about BYOD here. I'm talking about the whole concept of mobile device management and security within the corporate space. BYOD, as you'll see, is only just one tier of that, but he's speaking specifically about BYOD. Those that anticipate the workflow mobility wave, making reasoned decisions, again, there's that realistic application of the technology, and limiting the choices. So it's all about getting that control back that currently right now we don't really have completely. We'll offer you a device, we'll offer you some technologies, but you have to meet us halfway is what we're saying to the BYODers of the world, and that's fine. There's a middle ground there, and I'll show you that. Just thought some really good relevant quotes to start off with. So here we are, state of the state. Let me draw that one out. Don't know why that's doing that. Okay, some interesting statistics, and it's that changing landscape I mentioned. In 2011, 4.5 billion subscriptions. By the end of this year, 6.5 billion. By the end of next year, 6.9. You can see there's an exponential growth going on here. That just means more and more BYOD type situations for us. And the fact that it's now a globalization, it's done. We all have it. Just out of curiosity, how many people here own iPhones? Show of hands. Okay, now Droid people. Okay, interesting. Now both. How many people have both? Okay, more than I thought. All right, we all have them, right? And I want to talk to the people who had their hands up on the third question, the both people about that. Sales growth is up. Apple sold 84 million iPads in 2010 alone. I'm not just picking on Mac because I own one. I own a little bit of everything. It's just an interesting statistic. When I broke it down, it's 160 a minute since its release, if you do the math. And that's got to be in the ballpark. I don't believe all statistics, but even if it's just partially true, the numbers are staggering. Half of all Americans own smartphones. I think actually it's more. 3 out of 5 employees, this is the one to pay attention to, use personal devices in the workspace for work-related activity. Show of hands, how many people here use their phone for work? Yeah, I mean, if you don't raise your hand, then you're lucky. You really are a very lucky person. But anyway, anybody have a phone here that flips open? Anybody at all? No? Ooh. Sorry about that. Yeah, really? Oh my God. Okay. The average American has 4 mobile phones. Agree, my kids both have 3. I mean, they're only 13 and 15. So it's here, it's not going anywhere, it's only gonna get more and more and more. So, all right, bless you. The next 3 slides here, and I'm gonna go through them kind of quick because again, I wanna get some time back. Really just categorize, first of all, this is the organization's that best describes changing your organization experiencing with respect to alternative endpoint devices. Okay, we're experiencing significant growth and moderate growth. Those 2 categories obviously making up a large part of this. So more and more people are bringing their devices into the workplace. Okay, again, all statistics should be taken with a grain of salt because as we know, 80% of statistics are wrong 90% of the time, or wherever the quote goes. You get it. So this is those devices, employers and organizations using them for processes specifically related to the industry that they're in, okay? So critical and important processes. I don't know the difference really here between important and critical, but this actually showing that a large amount of the organizations are allowing their employees to take part in using their devices either provided by the company or on their own to support what the company does, its processes, procedures, and everything else. And the final one here is what types of data are they touching? For me, this actually lines up pretty well with my personal profile, our confidential data, customer data, regulated data, intellectual property. These are the kind of things I touch every single day when I stop to think about it. The information and the data you currently have on those devices that we all seem to have here in this room, collectively, if exposed in the wrong arena and to the wrong people, would be devastating to those organizations. We all have a little bit of that. And if it's not stored on your device has access to it in some way, shape, or form. So the players. I talked about the landscape, and I'll use a lot of analogies for sports because I'm in the baseball a lot, but you need to know your players, you need to know your competition, the other teams, the rules you're playing by on the field, and the capabilities that you have on your own team or that you have accessibility to. Those are the 3 big things, and it applies here in this space as well. So here's the players. The players here in this case, though, are literally making up the rules as they go along. It's a newer space. So their technologies are limiting us and providing us with the capabilities we have to manage mobile devices and things of that nature. So here they are. This is 2011, okay? So let's just fast forward a little bit. I went back to 2010, but there were so many logos, I really couldn't fit them on here without making an eye chart out of it. So fast forward now, in 2012, we see some of them just simply disappear, get out of the space altogether. Now they're gone for a couple of different reasons. They've merged, they bought other companies, they decided to get out of the space, go in a different direction. But in 2012, they're replaced with a whole new host of companies and different products with different capabilities because they're still reading the market and finding out what people do, what they want. And it's like anything else that's new. The players change, they merge, they buy each other out, they get out of the game, new ones get into the game, and we're still in that process. You've got some consistent leaders and innovators, but still the niche players are coming and going, and that's the exciting part for me. There's a whole bunch of those that are out there with some really cool and unique opportunities to provide for capabilities, but by and large, these are some of the bigger players. I probably could have added a whole bunch more. If I asked you guys all to throw up names, I'm sure we're going to get like another 50 on this particular slide deck. The point is this: the changing landscape, the capabilities, and the players, they're all moving around right now. So it's hard to really effectively assess what you should do first if you haven't gotten into a mobile device management strategy, or if you're in the midst of it and now you're kind of wondering what the next step is. That's what I'm hoping to help you with for the rest of this presentation. Okay, we've seen the evolution of mobile device strategies best practices over the few years, and I'm sorry I'm talking to you after you probably all just ate and the room's a little warm and the words policy and procedure up around the screen, so bear with me. I know, it's a little dry, but it's really important. So in any successful project, can we all agree that it's 80% prep and 15% execution, 5% luck, or thereabouts, right? This is the prep part. It's all free on paper. And we want to jump right into the technology part because it's fun, it's sexy, it's the cool part. I get to flip things on and watch my phone do certain things, or my tablets. But unless you've actually gone through and we've developed a tiered strategy here, those devices that would be heavily managed, light to medium level of management, and then the unmanaged people, or the BYODers, you have to have an answer or strategy for every one of them. Okay, I'm going to just draw this entire one out here. There we go. Okay, so for at each tier, what we've developed or what we've seen in the industry really lends itself to a heavy, light, medium, and unmanaged tiering application. But you got to understand the risk, resources, time, and money associated with each one, because that'll help you wrap your head around what direction you and your organization should go in. Are you going to be militant about it and rule with an iron fist and say everybody gets, this device configured in this way with these agents, and that's it? Anything else, don't even bring it into the building. Field service, executive types, proprietary applications, full suite of corporate applications are accessible to them, either delivered virtually via some sort of MDM agent, some secure web applications as well. You have a limited ability to store data locally. And if you do, it's usually encrypted, including memory. Corporate data plans are typically fully funded or at least partially funded. Some kind of stipend is given to the employees. And there you go. You got your company labeled phone, which I would imagine why you have two devices. In some cases, this is my work and this is my life, and I don't like a Droid, so I got an iPhone, or vice versa. So you run into that. We run into that a lot. This is really where we see a lot of organizations starting to develop their plan. It's a light to medium managed plan. General office workers, you get email calendaring, web applications on these at this level, a partial suite of corporate apps, some of which they can select and download from the internal app store for that organization that are approved and controlled by an MDM agent. But they have a very limited ability, if no ability whatsoever, to store local data, because that's still half the time that device is being used for personal reasons, if not more. Data plan stipend of some kind is usually provided. And then finally, we have the unmanaged, or the BYOD people. Okay, they're bringing in whatever it is they have, right? And they want access, okay? Well, good for them. They're a good corporate citizen. They want to work. But they want to use their device. Okay, it's 90% of the time it's used for playing Angry Birds or whatever it is, but they also want to access corporate email, right? They want to access, and they want everything. They want their cake and eat it too. Where they can't generally have it, most organizations should push back a little bit on this. So you're generally left with very limited proprietary list of applications, web-based, very secure applications are delivered via the web, no data whatsoever stored locally. And there's a little bit more of an allowance for that we've seen in the last couple of years, but it's also a dangerous game to play. So think about this as you're kind of developing, where do you fall and where do you want to actually start managing devices, heavy, light, medium, or unmanaged. And we're going to see this kind of theme repeat. So here we go. This is the part where I ask you to bear with me. Policies, and then we're going to get right into the technology side. So 80% of it really should be spent doing scenarios, walkthroughs, whiteboarding. It's all free on paper. So develop it in accordance to a tiered approach, or whatever makes sense to you from that last slide, and then jump right into this. Policy, standards, guidelines, procedures. working with your audit teams, HR, legal. If you're thinking about developing a plan that involves you providing hardware to your employees, okay, there's lots of rules and regulations that are out there. In fact, I've got a really good slide coming up regarding a new framework specifically for smartphones. Some of you may have heard about it, but it's just recently released, and it's some pretty good stuff. I got some links and some information on that. So the high, medium, light, and unmanaged device scenarios, what happens if we give this, this device out? What happens if we publish these applications with our current level of security and sophistication in our infrastructure? Walk through all those. What happens when an employee leaves? How do you get back any information or do a remote wipe or a reset of the device? Are they going to allow you to do that? What's your culture in your environment lend itself to? A large part of that actually falls into the culture and the politics of where you come from. You'll know better than I and anybody else, obviously, what your culture will bear. Theft, loss, damage, what happens when a phone gets lost? Walk through a complete scenario if an executive level's phone is lost after using it for a couple of years. What happens? What's on that device? So develop your policies very early on in the process. Once you've got that done, we can jump right into the technology. So implement the technologies that provide the following basic tenets, okay? We're not going to get specific here yet, we will further down. But at a high level, timely and costly hardware provisioning and deprovisioning. So if you want to hand out devices, or if you want to accept a limited list of devices on an accepted list, or the BYOD type scenario, you have to have a cost-effective way of provisioning apps on their devices, or provisioning the entire thing. Are you working with your carriers? Do you understand what they can do, what the cost associated with all that is? But then the actual cost of deployment and supporting that entire infrastructure. Do you want to own it, or do you want to outsource it to some other organization like an AT&T or Verizon, what have you? Okay, but you have to have a way or an answer for that, getting the devices out there, publishing apps in a consistent way. The secure remote access options, are you going to support all of them, some of them? How are they going to get back into your infrastructure? Do your VPN gateways have the sophistication needed to filter out and recognize when a mobile app is connecting or a mobile device is connecting versus your traditional laptop connection? You need to know the difference between the two. It'll make sense here in another slide. Enforcing authentication infrastructures, two-factor authentication, you're going to go with tokens, you're going to go with software-based tokens. There's a lot of options out there. One thing I will point out, though, is, and I'm just curious, hardware-based tokens for logging in, authentication, how many people here carry a hardware token on them right now? Okay. How many people in this room carried one of those hardware tokens 5 years ago? Okay, I didn't count them all, but it looked like a little bit more to me. So it's my concept there is the trend seems to be going down for hardware-based tokens. Okay, software-based tokens are easier, they're cheaper. You can deploy them literally as a service. So think about your two-factor authentication. There's apps that run now on the smartphones. Think about how that integrates with your mobile device management strategy and how you're going to roll that out. Highly recommended, obviously. Virtual application delivery based on structured authorization classification. So here's something. We all, hopefully, most of us have a structured user-based authentication model for, I'm Dan Gregory, and I'm a Unix admin. Okay, I'll have access to certain applications. Someone else in accounting would have a completely different list of applications and so on. If you've not developed that already internally, that's something to really seriously consider before you roll out and put another layer of confusion known as mobile device management on top of everything, because now you're considering integrating that same methodology but remotely. What access do they have to certain apps? Okay, and if that isn't already in place and solid, it's like having a bad DNS infrastructure. You try to install an app and it reveals all the ugly stores and bruises that you already have. So don't make your lives harder than they already are. Go through that, structure that. What apps are available to what classification of people and within the org chart before you deploy these things out. That is a big stumbling block for when we're helping our clients deploy an MDM strategy. Asset management and recovery. How are you going to administer this? Are you going to provide any kind of support or administration whatsoever to the end users when they call you and say, my phone just froze? Okay, if they're a BYOD person, we all know what to tell them, right? But if they are heavily managed, then you're going to have support staff that is knowledgeable of the device they have, what the problems are. It expands everything else. So the help desk is now, or your support mechanism is going to have to expand to accommodate all these mobile devices. It's another big tenet of this, and another thing that a lot of organizations fail to realize up front, and they get in really deep, and it becomes a big, big problem for them. Okay, so the lowest tier, I want to talk about just specifically the BYOD group right now for a minute. Strategy should not be dependent on any of the following things. So if you're considering supporting bring me your devices, and I will give you some sort of access, you should consider the following. You're going to be met with a completely different set of hardware choices than you did if you had actually deployed them yourselves. So it's going to be anything and everything. I'm sure we have hundreds of different makes and models of phone in the building right here, right now. You can't support all of them. Don't try. It's expensive and unrealistic. So be prepared to support the generic bottom line lowest common denominator that generally works for like your major operating systems, the Droids, the iOS and such. Corporate data storage and retention, if it isn't there, you don't have to worry about it. So make hard and fast rules, set up security boundaries to ensure that no data at all is ever stored on those BYOD devices. That's a recommendation, obviously. It's a common sense one, but it's one that you need to consider because it takes technology and it takes the policies behind it to enforce that. Otherwise, it leaks out and it happens on its own. And users adhere to security best practices. People are lazy. I am. We take the path of least resistance. I'm not going to follow your security best practices, policies, and procedures. Fine. We're going to put things in place that limit your choices and take away all the sharp knives so you can't cut yourself even if you tried. So boil down again to that lowest common denominator, knowing that people will not follow any of your process and procedures for their own device. I know I wouldn't. Device availability, theft, loss, and damage. Again, strategy should not be dependent upon the fact that somebody lost their device, their own phone. I can't tell you how many times I've lost this phone in the last few years, and it will happen. So plan on that as being there and assume they're going to lose their phone or their own personal device. You don't want anything from your organization on there that would put you and your organization at risk. Security options. Don't rely on third-party apps that they may download or install, or heaven forbid, the actual operating system itself. It's just as flawed as any other operating system ever was and will be. A lot of people in this room actually enjoy finding those holes and cracks and going after them. They're always going to be there. So keep that in mind with the BYODs. Those are your lowest common denominators, and those are the variables, and those are the rules that you have to play with or consider. Okay. What are you getting yourself into? So this is where we get technical. We've developed 4 main tenets at CBI over the last few years, working with customers for deployment of mobile device management strategies, and they fall into any one of 4 different categories. Yours may look different, but this is our actual version of that. So with mobile management and provisioning, you're going to be looking at technologies, vendors, providers of solutions that allow you to do the asset tracking. So this is for the heavy or medium managed deployments. How do you track them physically? You're going to put a barcode. How are you going to know how many you have? The costs associated with all that management, and ongoing turnover and renewal and upgrades. Inventory management, remote configuration and provisioning. It's all part of management provisioning. Access and security, enforcing policies, and obviously now I'm talking about the security policies. How are you going to push those down onto those devices and ensure that they're being adhered to in a timely manner? You have to have some sort of infrastructure to make that happen. Logging and reporting, obviously, remote lock and wipes. That's an important one we can actually key back on in a few more slides. Remote and local access infrastructures, how are they going to get to you? How are they going to connect? Delivery and support, the application and installation and delivery, that firmware over the air or FOTA, that is if you own those devices or if the organization has provided those to your employees. Troubleshooting, remote control administration, backup data recovery, data end-to-end encryption, including memory level encryption, and then GPS tracking and the breadcrumbs, knowing where it is physically if they lose it. Okay, something else that's on here that occurs to me now, only just a few weeks later after redeveloping some of these slide decks, is training. You're going to need to train those employees, especially if you're handing those out to them, or at least giving them a stipend, because then you have ownership, which means you own the data. It's no different than a laptop, right? We give it to our employees. We always say this. We own the data. We own the hardware. It's ours. We can set whatever policies we want. But for the bring your own devices, it doesn't apply anymore. So you really have to, be careful what you do and how you deploy that. Again, they want their cake and eat it too. It's hard to do that. So typical use cases. So typically for device provisioning, secure mobile app delivery, there's a life cycle of mobile devices. We give out a device or we get a device. We install applications. We're allowed to connect to various sources of information in a secure way, hopefully. We interact with that data. We can either store it, forward it, and then at the end of that life cycle, if we've moved on to another organization and the phone was provided, we have to give it back. Or if it was a bring your own device, I have to somehow cut the cord, and as an administrator of the organization, I have to ensure that there's no remnants left or the ability to reconnect or use the data in ways that we did not intend for it to be used. So devices being provisioned, some sort of centralized management database, obviously your MDM solution should help you do that. Users being assigned to that device, and that's important to know. It's just as important to know if a user has laptop 123 as it is that owner also has phone number 123. You have to have asset and inventory and management. It gets back to that user provisioning and authentication. Who has access to what apps, what devices, and such. The MDM agents are typically installed when they're provisioned. Now, there's a lot of different schools of thought on this. If you're going to deploy wirelessly, or you're going to ask everybody to bring in their devices, then you can synchronize it with some sort of process, physically connect it, install an app, and then give it back. There's a lot of logistics involved in the latter, obviously, but there's a lot of risk involved in the first one. How do you know it got there and got installed correctly? Am I going to have to deal with a fallout of help desk calls? There's a lot of different things going on there. So once the agent is installed, it locks it down and enforces the policies, the technical policies that we're talking about, the things that you want them to do and not want them to do. We're going to get into a DLP discussion here near the end, and we'll get into a little bit more of that. Locking down those devices and ensuring they can't do the things you don't want them to do, but are allowed to do the things they're allowed to do, obviously. SSL VPN clients, HTTPS, WTLS, the connectivity now is then established. And like I said, some of the more intelligent vendors, hardware solutions or gateway solutions are differentiating between mobile device traffic, laptop traffic. There's a very big difference between the two. Knowing the vendors and which ones provide some good options is key to this. Then they're allowed to access the applications to which they have access. This gets back to authentication and authorization to launch certain apps versus others. And the information is then displayed. So that's basically the premise of it. Every step of this requires thought and architecting, implementation, and a staff of people to support it, or at least a group of people responsible for making sure that this all happens. BYOD, heavy, medium, or light use, it doesn't matter. A lot of these tenants are still going to be there, and you have to think about how your organization is going to provide those. Okay. So the end of its life, right? We want to decommission. Okay, well, I thought I had more time than that. Sorry. Let me just get down to one slide, food for thought, where you guys leave and you walk out. You can actually just take this as takeaway. And there is one other, I can give you a copy of this, by the way. I wanted to get down to this one right here. There is a virtual, sorry about that. Never was good at keeping track of time. It's this one right here. There is a new smartphone framework that's out there, smartphone pen test framework. Has anybody heard of it? SPF? No? It's really new. And if I had to just show you one slide as a takeaway, I would show you this one. There we go. Presenter. And it's a link. There we go. So. Wasn't letting me do it the traditional way, so I'm having to walk through my presentation again. Of course, it's the last slide. It's the very last one. Got through that. Use case scenarios. And here we go. than happy to give this. I have it on a thumb drive, so I can copy it pretty quickly for everybody. There. Smartphone pen test framework. Bulbsecurity.com, or if you just Google bulbsecurity.com SPF, you'll find it. It's a very interesting new framework. It actually was developed to do pen tests against smartphones, and it's open source. It's free. It was funded by DARPA, and I know a lot of people, if you went to DEF CON or Black Hat, you may have seen or heard about it. They were using it there quite a bit. So, sorry, I know I ran a little bit over time, but I appreciate everybody coming. Thanks so much. I'll make myself available.